Story 1, Paparazzi. Not only do you have to be morally corrupt to do the job, but it also contributes to a culture that idolizes and worships celebrities to such an extent that it has negatively warped our perspective on how we view them, how we view each other, and even how we view ourselves. Story 2. These quick cash services charge extremely high interest rates. Predatory lenders are prevalent. All credit cards have rates over 8%. Large corporations are purchasing homes to rent them out. Story 3. Many predatory sales practices exist. If you are promoting a business that has a significant moral dilemma, that is highly unethical. Industries like gambling, alcohol, and tobacco have all invested millions to exploit extremely vulnerable individuals and execute these strategies aggressively. Story 4. Beauty pageant judges, especially those for children, ignore how inappropriate it is to tell little girls they are not pretty enough or good enough. Story 5. Politicians are not prioritizing their constituents. This issue affects both parties. Story 6. Health insurance companies often employ individuals whose role is to deny claims until a person appeals enough to reach someone who will review the facts. Phone scammers often target individuals with messages about car warranties. Collection agencies frequently use any contact information they possess, ignoring repeated notifications of incorrect numbers or addresses. Story 7. Chiropractors do not provide effective assistance. The entire practice is questionable. It is better to seek help from a licensed physical therapist if you have a problem. Story 8. Title loans. They target individuals with no credit who typically have only one asset, their car. A $600 loan would cost over $1,200 to repay. It is an unfair practice. If you are willing to take advantage of those in desperate situations, you can often place a low bid on a repossessed vehicle. As long as your bid covers the loan and is the highest, you will acquire the car. However, please refrain from supporting these exploitative practices that prey on the impoverished. Story 9. An ex-partner was an environmental consultant for a major oil company. She primarily assisted them in meeting only the minimum legal requirements. As she put it, her work involved damaging the planet while avoiding accountability. Story 10. University development employees who reach out to individuals to request donations often target older individuals, some of whom may have dementia. They may ask for personal information, such as credit card numbers, without regard for the individual's situation. Large universities often possess endowments worth billions, yet they still seek contributions from others. Story 11. Pharmacy benefit managers manipulate drug prices to secure higher rebates, resulting in significant price inflation. They also determine which insurance plans a pharmacy is contracted with, limiting options for patients. For example, individuals with Caremark insurance may only access CVS pharmacies, even if the nearest location is over an hour away. As someone who works in a pharmacy, I find these practices deeply concerning. Story 12. Television licensing officials in the United Kingdom aim to intimidate as many individuals as possible into purchasing the license, even those who do not require it. Story 13. Lobbyists point out that oil companies are doing everything possible to discredit green energy and electric vehicles. Story 14. Building large technology social media software products can waste billions of hours of human time and negatively impact mental health. Story 15. Property management is often scrutinized, and homeowners associations justifiably receive their share of the blame. However, it is important to consider all aspects of the situation. Story 16. Private, for-profit prisons are dangerously understaffed, making conditions more hazardous for both inmates and staff. The prison assigns inmates to various jobs, but they receive none of the earnings. What do you call working without pay and being unable to leave? Story 17. Speed camera operators have no problem being dealt with by the police, but those cameras are frustrating. I haven't had a ticket in years. The fines here in Australia are substantial. If you are just an average family and one of those fines comes in, you certainly feel the impact. Being 6 kilometers over the limit should not be considered an offense. Story 18. Portfolio manager and product developer at a tobacco company. They specifically target children with their harmful substances in their electronic cigarettes. If there were ever a job that the devil would support, it would be this one. Story 19. I worked at a large engineering company ranked among the top 500 in the world. I experienced burnout and they transferred me to a recruiting team. My role involved interviewing key engineers from competitors and startups, asking probing questions to discover their innovative techniques. The interview notes were then used by the legal department and executives to decide whether to acquire, sue, or replicate competitor technology. The legal department ensured we wouldn't face any risks of infringing on intellectual property, so it was considered legal. I found the role significantly less stressful compared to my engineering position, as I simply had to engage with people about interesting technology. However, I quickly became uncomfortable with the ethical implications, especially when speaking with passionate startup founders or hopeful employees, knowing that we likely wouldn't hire them and that corporate might use this information to undermine them. Before this, I served as a generalist system architect. If the company wanted to develop a multi-room smart speaker, it was my responsibility to design the product and identify which teams to use and whom to hire, as well as explore hardware supplier options. Being able to shift focus every hour to a different technology niche and understand how their products functioned, alongside assessing candidates' skill sets, was genuinely enjoyable. This questionable role was my favorite job, provided I didn't consider the ethical concerns. Story 20. Quantitative easing involves selling tax credits to schools as a way to legally bypass periods when loaning is not permitted and selling bonds to governments to fund expenditures that would have occurred regardless. This process unnecessarily generates interest that is ultimately borne by taxpayers. Story 21. Operators of deceptive hotlines include, for example, questionable fortune-telling or astrology hotlines that take money from the pockets of desperate individuals. Story 22. If you are the developer who wrote the system that implemented rental bidding, I hope you reconsider your approach. Story 23. Businesses that utilize inexpensive international labor include American companies employing Filipino workers to cold call vulnerable individuals, offering to sell their homes at prices significantly lower than market value, while earning less than $5 per hour. Story 24. Shilling in social media, journalism, marketing for large pharmaceutical companies, politics, and anything that involves dishonesty for profit. Story 25. Payday loans thrive on charging high interest rates to individuals who cannot afford them. Story 26. People are making cold calls to buy homes. The fact that they can obtain your name and address and repeatedly call to make low offers on houses that are not even available is astounding. Everything about it feels like a scam, yet it is legal. Story 27. Defense attorney. On many levels, paid to manipulate information and to protect those they know very well are guilty. Story 28. Bartender. I know several people who could no longer continue in this role as they recognized that their regular customers were alcoholics ruining their lives while they were the ones serving them. Story 29. Being a president or vice president in the United States requires very few qualifications. To be eligible, one must be a natural-born citizen and of a certain age. There is no requirement for a degree in law, political science, or any related field. Story 30. Marketing involves persuading people by using psychological techniques they may not recognize. If something is genuinely good, it does not require aggressive selling. Story 31. Being the chief executive officer of a private healthcare company in America, similar to any of the executives, I recognize that the average worker of a private insurance company is just trying to survive and make ends meet. I do not fully blame them for the decisions they are compelled to make to keep their jobs. However, the executives are responsible for how the company is run, and the negative aspects that saturate the industry rest entirely on their shoulders. Story 32. Predatory tow truck drivers sit in public parking lots and create expensive nightmares for people over trivial matters, or they outright steal cars, knowing that individuals often have limited legal options. Story 33. Private prisons, private health insurance, short-term loans, and high-interest lending quickly come to mind. Story 34. American health insurance has a significant impact on people's lives. I once had a job in Canada dealing with medical insurance claims from the United States. I was young and optimistic until I realized I had to be the one to deny coverage for certain claims that the company refused to approve. It was a soul-crushing experience. One case I'll never forget involved a woman with twins. One twin was healthy, while the other was not. To save the life of the sick twin, the medical expenses totaled almost $7 million, including the hospital stay. The company did not want to cover that and essentially said, "You have one healthy baby," so I was extremely disturbed by this. I quit that day. I will never understand how anyone can deny a child's life or anyone's life for the sake of profit. It is truly deplorable. Story 35. The defense attorney's job is to secure a not guilty verdict for their client, even if they know the client is guilty. The severity of the offense does not matter. Story 36. It seems that many people here do not understand the meaning of morally wrong. Being an oil executive is acceptable, but it is widely recognized that they engage in some ethically questionable practices. Story 37. The consultants advised Purdue Pharma to significantly increase sales by encouraging pharmacists to prescribe the medication to anyone, leading to widespread addiction. They were instrumental in creating the opioid epidemic in the Americas, not Canada or Mexico. Story 38. Probably just about any political congressional office at the moment. The amount of information you have access to, the ability to make laws that benefit you, and the ability to give raises and healthcare to yourself while doing nothing for anyone else. Making laws or promoting legislation that benefits your ability to buy and sell assets. Story 39. The problem occurs when an individual begins to use their position for personal gain in a blatant manner. Story 40. Funeral directors or any step in the process that sells caskets may be seen as preying on the grieving, which is unsettling. Story 41. Rent-a-center and other rent-to-own places. I was told to break into apartments with a screwdriver by my boss. I would not be shocked if I found out it was started by the mafia. Story 42. Real estate agents act as intermediaries between buyers and sellers, often with a vested interest in concealing issues from potential buyers and employing high-pressure sales tactics. They lobby the government for significant funding, making the home selling process unnecessarily complicated, preventing homeowners from easily transferring property ownership. This industry is often criticized for treating service workers poorly. Story 43. A family member's friend had a job-blasting car exhaust into monkey cages every 20 minutes. It was horrifying when he explained it. The fact that he did the job and that it was legal was terrible. Story 44. Lobbying through campaign contributions is clear bribery. It is legal in Canada and the United States, but trying this in many other countries could lead to being arrested for political corruption. Story 45. Those spam called debt collectors. I understand that you owe money and they want the money you owe them, but nobody enjoys being reminded several times a week that they are just as broke today as they were yesterday. Story 46. Insurance companies, politicians, banking, landlords, and most C-suite positions have no societal value and exist only because the government is not doing its job. They represent an abuse of political or fiscal power and contribute to societal leeching, where the rich take from the poor. If your job could be eliminated and the societal system could self-correct to a better one, then occupying that job is morally wrong. Story 47. The adjusters determine insurance payouts for situations like death and accidental death. Obviously, you can't arbitrarily decide on life insurance settlements, and considering health choices like smoking is valid for determining premiums. However, sitting there with a calculator and purposefully searching for ways to devalue someone by a specific dollar amount feels wrong. For example, a liability policy may pay up to $1 million for wrongful deaths, but they may deduct from that amount because the person used to smoke or had a heart attack in the past, stating that they probably wouldn't have lived a full life anyway. Story 48. A politician's second job is not so much morally but definitely ethically wrong, and it undoubtedly presents a conflict of interest. Story 49. I worked at a for-profit adult behavioral health hospital. The utilization review manager was responsible for maximizing the time the hospital could bill to the patient's insurance companies. If a patient was ready for discharge, they would often request additional days. If a patient exhausted their allotted days, Regardless of the necessity for more inpatient care, they would be discharged abruptly. Essentially, the patient's care was secondary to the corporate goal of maximizing profits. The unfortunate reality is that the patients were aware of this situation. Story 50. Hospitals and universities are prioritizing profits for shareholders instead of reinvesting in facilities and patient care. Story 51. I was in the military before getting hired at an online college as an enrollment advisor in the military section. At first, it wasn't horrible and the school was accredited. While I didn't love the high-pressure sales nature of the job or the deceptive tactics they used to avoid certain truths, it wasn't too bad and paid well. That changed when I was called into my boss's office, where they played a recording of a conversation with a student who was about to leave the military. He asked me the best way to use his GI Bill benefits. I told him honestly that, based on what he shared, he would be better off using his benefits at a local college, as attending online would actually cost him about $2,000 a month in benefits. I was written up for this, as I could have likely convinced the student to enroll online. I quit an hour later. Story 52. Certain types of lawyers are problematic. Legal aid lawyers can cause significant harm while pursuing government funding. Private practice family law attorneys can exhibit similar negative behavior. Story 53. Those people who stand in the middle of the grocery store trying to persuade you to sign a phone or cable contract. Story 54. Working for an arms company is problematic. If your job involves helping people improve weapons of war, it reflects poorly on your values. Story 55. I just realized that if bars and alcohol weren't legal, there would be many more intoxicated addicts on the streets. Alcohol withdrawal is deadlier than opioid withdrawal. Story 56. A friend works at a bonded warehouse at the airport, loading and unloading cases from airplanes. The same cases are being exported and then imported. This activity is part of a tax fraud scheme, although his role in the operation is legal. Story 57. Working in industries that contribute to environmental damage, such as deforestation, or in jobs that profit from exploitation, like sweatshops or certain forms of gambling, raises ethical concerns. While these activities may be legal, they can harm individuals, communities, and the environment. Story 58. Lumpers are temporary contractors that warehouses hire to unload semi-trucks. Drivers often have to pay anywhere from $150 to $1,000 out of their own pockets, though they are reimbursed later by the customer or broker, to be unloaded by these contractors. This situation arises because the warehouse owner is unwilling to hire workers directly. Lumper fees are not typically known in advance and serve as a tactic to transfer the cost of warehouse labor to others. While this practice is legal, it can be considered unfair. Story 59. Any media personality who receives payment from the Ministry of Strategic Affairs to defend Israel's policies. Story 60. Vulture capital companies buy other companies only to dismantle them and sell off the pieces, often firing all the employees. While this practice is legal and can be very profitable, it is unethical and fundamentally wrong. Story 61. The engineers who write the code that tracks you across the internet to sell you advertisements and promote ignorance. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.